Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. The upstairs door slammed, then my wife's footsteps pounded away. My son flinched on the couch and grabbed my wrist. My daughter slid to the floor and crawled behind my knee. Something rattled the back entrance like knuckles on bone, then paused. I'm Daniel Cross, 36. I raised my hand for silence. The hallway breathed like a throat after a sprint. Another thud from the kitchen, metal against wood. I moved between the stairs and my kids, heartbeat counting seconds. Down, I pointed to the pantry nook and opened it fast. They huddled inside and watched my face for answers. I gave none, only the signal for quiet. If someone was inside, noise would draw them. A shadow spilled across the stair wall and froze. I gripped the nearest thing that could pass for a club. The babysitter camera blinked and fed me nothing useful. I kept my stance low and my eyes on the landing. Glass clicked in the kitchen, not a fall, an adjustment. I tasted detergent in the air and felt my jaw tighten. If a stranger held a blade, that taste could hide blood. I shifted my weight and waited for the next sound. My phone vibrated once and died before the screen woke. I cursed it under my breath and reached for the charger. A door hinge answered me from the laundry room, slow and careful. The careful ones were worse than the loud ones. Dad, a whisper behind the pantry door, barely breath. I pressed a finger to my lips and nodded. The house fell still enough to hear my pulse. Fear makes people sprint or freeze. Tonight it divided us. Another scrape from the kitchen, drawn steel on tile. I edged forward with the makeshift club angled low. A chair leg blocked my shin and dared me to trip. I stepped over and kept the breathing quiet. The back door stuttered against its latch and held. Wind alone could not tug it that hard tonight. Screws winked from the mat like bait in a trap. Someone had touched what should have stayed untouched. Headlights washed the front wall and vanished, too quick for a stop. Tires spun gravel and fled toward the intersection. My chest dropped as if the floor tilted. She had the car and my kids had me. I whispered through the pantry gap and met two wet eyes. Count to 100 and keep counting. Small fingers started tapping the shelf like a metronome. If counting broke, I would know they broke too. The fridge motor kicked on and masked a softer tap. I used the hum like a curtain and moved. A kitchen drawer sat skewed, one slot empty. That missing shape pulled heat from my spine. Whoever you are, leave now, my voice found gravel. The curtain by the laundry twitched twice and settled. Wet, earthy air pushed under the door and stung. Rain meant prints on the porch and noise on escape. A cough leaked from the laundry, young and trying to hide. I lifted the curtain with the club ready to swing. A boy stared back, soaked sleeves clinging to his arms. He tucked his hands up, eyes on the floor. Don't call them, his voice rasped like old paper. He nodded toward the back door and swallowed. Dogs chased me, I thought this place was empty. His words shook, but his stance stayed set. I heard the pantry counting falter, 96, 97, break. Quiet, I called softly, then looked at the boy. He lifted a cracked phone with a blinking map dot. The dot sat close to our fence line. Sirens far off, thin first, then wider. The boy flinched and pressed against the washer. I'll go now, please, his lips trembled, breath shallow. I kept the club down, but not away. I opened the front door and raised my hands high. Kids inside, one minor in laundry, no weapons. The porch soaked my socks and sharpened my judgment. Blue lights rounded the corner and swallowed the street. Boots hit the hallway fast and decisive, room by room. The pantry opened and two little bodies rushed me. I held them with one arm and faced the uniforms. One officer met my eyes and then checked the driveway. Where is their mother? Not a question, a measure. My throat stalled on the honest answer. She had run toward what looked safe and away from us. I braced for a night that would not end clean. Boots rushed past me and split front and hallway. Gloves lifted the curtain and a flashlight pinned the teen. My kids clung to my legs and breathed like tiny engines. I kept my palms visible and waited for the verdict. Hands out, the beam stayed on the boy's chest. He shuffled forward with shoulders curled and eyes lowered. A zip tie clicked and his knees almost gave. Anyone else inside? The question landed on my face. Just us three. I touched my shirt to prove calm. Weapon, an officer pointed at the drawer gap near the sink. A thin blade lay alone beside the rack. Not mine, I said, because it mattered now. They guided the teen to a chair and asked his name. He mumbled through chattering teeth and stared at the floor. Do the kids need medics? A woman officer crouched low. No blood, I answered, but I could feel a tremor. My phone revived and lit with queued messages. 2 texts from her and 1 missed call. Someone inside. I ran to the car. Tell me you're coming. The screen waited like a dare. I dialed back and held the phone to my ear. Voicemail caught me on the second ring and swallowed everything. I hung up and typed 1 sentence slowly. The children are safe, come back now. A loud knock at the front made the kids jump. Another officer entered with a heavy breath and a nod. Perimeter clear. He scanned our faces and then the teen. Thunder rolled far off like a long warning. The crouching officer turned to me, eyes steady, voice level. Explain the order of what you heard. I gave the sequence clean and without filler. I kept my anger out because anger blurs truth. The teen lifted his head and tried to help. Fence snapped, dogs charged. I panicked. He glanced at my son and flinched. I grabbed the blade. I didn't swing. The last words barely formed. Why this house? The beam softened but stayed near him. My map glitched me to your yard. He held up the cracked phone with both hands. I believed the fear, but I still watched him. A car engine approached, then stalled at our curb. My pulse jumped before I knew why. I stepped to the window and peeled the curtain back. Her shape sat behind the wheel and did not move. I walked to the porch with 1 officer shadowing. Rain spit and cooled the heat under my skin. She opened the door and kept her gaze on the street. What happened after you ran? My voice surprised me. I thought you were right behind me. Her hands shook hard. She tried to smile at the kids through the glass. They didn't reach back and that hit like a slap. We'll talk inside, I said, because neighbors were watching. We re-entered and the room drew tight around us. The teen watched her with a flinch he could not hide. 1 officer took notes and another checked the rear exit. Stay available, the note-taker said, eyes never leaving us. My daughter broke away and climbed into my arms. My son followed and pressed his cheek to my shoulder. She reached out, then pulled back before touching them. That hesitation cut deeper than any intruder tonight. The teen started coughing and raised a finger for water. An officer nodded and poured from a plastic bottle. He drank in quick, desperate sips and tried to steady. I want to fix this, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Fix it how? I leaned forward without realizing. I can show where I came in, he pointed at the mud trail. Also where the dogs chased from. His throat worked around guilt. Proof mattered because doubt multiplies until it breaks things. 2 officers followed him toward the yard for a sweep. I stayed with the kids and listened to every footfall. She stood beside the sink and twisted a ring. Say something, she whispered, and I did not. Lightning flashed and a shout came from outside. Boots thudded back through the doorway, fast and urgent. Tracks confirm his story, the leading officer reported. Relief spread, but it carried a new cost. Statement from both of you, the woman officer said. Then we decide on charges for the minor. The teen stared at the floor and braced for impact. My mouth opened and a different choice formed. I'll file trespass and request diversion. My voice felt solid. Community hours, counseling, no overnight lockup. The teen looked up like a drowning kid who found air. The officer studied me, then wrote without comment. I turned to my wife and held her eyes. We finish this part first, I said, meaning the forms. Then we talk about the door and the drive. Her chin dipped the smallest nod and fear shifted shape. We signed where they pointed and gave our final lines. The teen thanked everyone and kept his distance from us. Patrol escorted him out with a warning and a plan. The house quieted, but the silence was not peace. I locked what could lock and checked each point twice. She watched me move and did not interrupt. The kids curled on the couch and finally loosened. The night was not over because trust does not reset. The latch clicked as the last cruiser rolled away. I killed the porch glow and listened for any leftover movement. The house breathed in short bursts like it had run a race. She stood by the sink and watched my hands tighten. Check everything, I kept my voice low and clipped. She nodded, then reached for the hallway light and paused. Leave it off, I pointed to the rear entry and moved. If someone still lingered, light would guide them. I slid the chain across the front and tested it twice. The kids sagged against cushions and fought sleep with stubborn eyes. I lifted a blanket over their legs and whispered, count again. They resumed a whispering rhythm that steadied my pulse. Door first, I headed to the mudroom and crouched. 2 screw heads lay clean on the mat like dropped teeth. Fresh SCR. 8 blinds ran along the strike plate near the bend. The teen had not done that kind of work. Do you see it? She leaned close and kept distance. I traced the bright gouge with one finger and stopped. The edge tore a curl from the wood like a ribbon. Another tool had tested our home before tonight. My phone buzzed with a push from the doorbell app. A new clip waited with a red dot that dared me. I tapped and watched a warped figure tilt into frame. Not the kid, taller, heavier, slower by intent. The figure tried the handle, then looked straight at the lens. A hood hid features, but the jawline was adult and square. He stepped back, scanned the street, then slipped out of view. I replayed the 5 seconds and felt heat in my neck. That's not him, she pressed a knuckle to her lip. My stomach folded once and then locked in place. Time stamp, I enlarged the corner and read the numbers. 2 hours before the chase even started. She whispered my name and looked at the back hall. I wiped the screen and opened the second camera folder. Another clip loaded with slow, stuttering frames from the yard. A boot print flashed in a line of wet soil. The print pointed toward our fence, not away from it. A different tread than the sneakers by the washer earlier. Deeper weight, wider forefoot, no drag or stumble. Someone scanned the exit routes while the neighborhood slept. Call them back, her voice carried a crack that hurt. Not yet, I opened the freezer and grabbed 2 gel packs. I set them under the split door to lift the frame slightly. If the lock misaligned again, we would hear it. She moved to the kids and brushed a curl from a forehead. They twitched and settled like small animals after thunder. Why didn't you follow me? She kept her gaze on them. I swallowed words that would harden into stone tonight. I tapped the counter and forced my eyes to the footage. The adult silhouette returned for a second attempt and failed. He bent, looked under the mat, then gave up and vanished. He knew where people hide keys, which meant practice. I opened a group chat with our across-the-street neighbor. Check your recordings from dusk to now. 3 dots pulsed, then a link appeared with a label. Caught someone casing cars, not the kid. I played the shared clip and felt my scalp tighten. Same build, same deliberate scan up and down the block. He paused at our driveway and leaned over the mailbox. His hand disappeared inside and then withdrew empty. We never keep a spare there, she pinched the bridge of her nose. I stared at the empty slot and felt a slow dread gather. Your key fob last seen. I patted my pocket and stopped short. She looked at her bag and went still. Is it in the car? I kept my tone even but sharp. Her hands dug through the side pocket and came up with receipts. She dumped the rest and found nothing metal. The car likely unlocked all night with the fob inside. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the driveway at once. She followed close enough that I could hear her breathing. The car opened with a soft chirp before I even touched it. I fished under the seat and found the fob where it slid. Rain picked up and dotted the windshield in rapid taps. I thumbed the hood clip and scanned the interior for disturbances. No mess, no missing dash plates, only a faint damp scent. Water on the floor mat near the pedals glistened like a clue. Close it and come back, she hugged herself and shivered. I locked the doors and tried the handles to be sure. We cut across the yard and I checked the side gate. The latch rested one notch higher than I ever leave it. Inside, I rolled towels at the thresholds and wedged chairs. I placed a pot on the stairs for a rattling alarm. She watched the setup and rubbed her wrist until it reddened. Are we sleeping here? Her eyes flicked to the couch. We're not sleeping. I kept my feet moving and my brain busy. Camera batteries at 60, put them on charge. She took the cords and worked without looking at me. Silence did not mean peace, it meant we were thinking. My phone buzzed again with another message from next door. Got plates on a slow van from earlier. I opened the clip and paused on a frame by our curb. The van idled with its lights off for 15 seconds. A hand stuck out of the passenger window and made a gesture. 2 taps on the door, then a point toward our place. The van rolled on once a jogger appeared at the corner. Not random traffic, a look and a plan. I copied everything to a shared drive in case phones died. Then I dialed the non-emergency line and prepared the report. New evidence link. I read the plate aloud and sent the clips. The dispatcher promised a patrol sweep before dawn. She dug a hoodie from the chair back and pulled it close. Do we tell your mother about tonight? Tomorrow, I watch the hallway like a lifeguard on a rough sea. Tonight we hold position and keep the kids steady. What? A floorboard above us popped with a memory of footsteps. I felt the old surge that turns thought into motion. I climbed 2 steps and paused with an open palm. No movement followed, but the tension stayed sharp. Her phone vibrated on the table and flashed a single line. Unknown number, 1 word, you home. She stared as if the screen could explain itself. I took a photo of the display before it cleared. New SIM, she fumbled the settings and checked the log. No contact name, no previous thread, only that single poke. She turned off the device and slid it into a drawer. We both heard the rain chase across the siding like static. I brewed instant coffee and handed her the steaming cup. The bitterness forced our minds to stay in the present. We sipped in short pulls that kept us from shaking. Caffeine can be discipline when fear wants to rewrite rules. The kids stirred and began their quiet count again. I answered with a steady beat on the table. They matched it and fell back under for a while. Their calm rhythm covered the hum of distant traffic. I walked the perimeter once more and tightened every hinge. The video captured frame by frame went into a labeled folder. The plate number repeated in my head like a code. I knew the next steps would demand choices we had avoided. She set her cup down and finally looked me full in the face. I need you to tell me if you can forgive the car. Her voice held no wobble now, only a request for truth. I inhaled to answer and the doorbell chimed once, soft and wrong. I didn't move toward the peephole, I killed the chime at the panel. My hand hovered over the deadbolt and stayed. Who is it? I pitched my voice flat and loud. Silence pressed back through the wood like a held breath. Her eyes locked on mine, then on the monitor. I brought up the porch feed and froze the frame. A cap brim tilted up just enough to avoid identification. A finger covered the lens for a beat, then slid away. Delivery for Daniel, the voice sounded careful and wrong. We didn't order anything, I kept the chain set. Signature required, the knob twitched once and stilled. My grip hardened because polite lies opened doors. I angled the camera to catch more of the steps. A second shape waited off to the right, weight on toes. Leave it there, I raised my tone and watched shadows shift. Both shapes held position like they wanted a cue. The hallway monitor blinked a message from the driveway cam. Motion near the mailbox again. I zoomed and caught a hand reach under the lid. The lid closed slower than it should, sticky with tape. I mouthed count to her and pointed at the knob. She nodded and slid toward the kids with steady steps. Back room, blanket, no lights, she moved like training. I took a long breath and unlocked only the handle. The door opened an inch against the chain. Step away from the frame, I kept my stance square. The parcel corner nudged the gap, then backed off. ID up to the camera, the parcel retreated into the night. Footsteps retreated 2 paces and stopped. The lens caught a sleeve, then the edge of a wrist. No badge, no company branding, just bare skin and patience. I shut the door hard enough to rattle the chain. The unknown number pinged her phone on the table again. Still awake, 2 words and a dot. I snapped a photo and pushed it to the dispatch thread. The typing bubble returned and then died. I hit the fob and set the car horn off in bursts. Both porch shadows flinched and slipped sideways. The side gate latch clicked with a ratty scrape. They knew our layout better than a random passerby. Back door, I whispered toward the hallway and lifted a chair. The chair wedged under the knob with a clean bite. My pulse slowed to something I could aim. I grabbed the toolbox magnet from the fridge and palmed it. At the mailbox, I kept low and quick. The lid lifted with a tacky peel. A coin-sized disc sat under the lip with fresh adhesive. I pried it off and felt the hum of a tiny battery. Headlights swept the corner and disappeared around the bend. I didn't leave the yard, I dropped the disc into the grill. The lid clanged and muffled the ping under metal. If they tracked that signal, they'd come to heat and smoke. Inside, she met me at the threshold with wide pupils. Front shadows moved to the side gate. Then they're testing for a weak hinge. I checked my wedges. The upstairs camera pinged, hallway sensor tripped for a second. Cats, she tried the word like a prayer. We don't own any, the screen showed an empty corridor. I switched to the yard view and caught a sleeve crossing the fence. 1 figure, not 2, the other had vanished. I dialed back the non-emergency line and bumped priority. Possible tracker found, active presence at side fence. Units dispatched, the operator answered, voice tight and focused. Stay put, no confrontation, as if that had been an option. The doorbell rang twice fast, and nothing. I called through the wood without opening. Police are en route, I wanted that sentence heard outside. Footsteps retreated into the yard with deliberate calm. My son stirred and sat up with damp hair. Bathroom, he pointed and waited for permission with clenched jaw. Go, door open, I escorted him down the hall and back. He climbed under the blanket and watched me instead of sleeping. I took the disc from the grill and dropped it into a metal tin. I sealed the lid and set it on the counter near my wallet. Evidence matters when stories get picked apart. She watched me label it with the time and the porch note. Do we leave now? Her voice rode the edge of a quake. If we run, we teach them we're movable. And if they come in, her hands folded and unfolded. Then I put myself between them and this room. A radio squawk fluttered from the street like a hawk call. Blue flicker brushed the window and grew stronger. I unlocked the top latch and opened exactly 3 inches. Officers here, a voice announced, steady and close. They cleared the yard while another checked the porch. I held the tin out with a single nod. Found under the mailbox lid. Gloved fingers slipped it into a bag and snapped it shut. Van with matching plates circled twice tonight, one reported. We'll run it and canvas for additional cameras. I handed over the timestamp list from our feeds. He scanned it and signaled a partner toward the corner. She hovered near the kids and kept her face toward me. I could read the question in her shoulders without words. Later I mouthed and her jaw flexed once. The house hummed like a coil pulled tight. A neighbor yelled from across the street with a wary wave. Everything okay? He stood behind his storm door barefoot. Almost, I called and pointed at the patrol lights. He nodded and lifted his phone to record the block. The bagged disc beeped once in the officer's hand. He cocked his head and watched the screen on his portable. Pinging right now, he muttered, then keyed his radio. Tracker active, likely watcher nearby. Units shifted along the curb. A rustle came from the hedge line at our property edge. 2 flashlights cut a cone and pinned a crouched figure. Hands rose slowly above the shrub, fingers splayed. No rush, no fight, just calculated surrender. They pulled a mask down from the chin and turned the face. Not the teen from earlier, older by 2 decades at least. Eyes flat, jaw tight, shirt damp. Why the mailbox? An officer asked with a clipped tone. Wrong house, the man shrugged like it was a parking ticket. Then why the tracker? My question came out before I checked it. His eyes slid to our door and then away. He didn't answer, which answered plenty. They cuffed him and called for transport with a short code. Another unit rolled slow past our driveway and kept moving. Partner still at large, the radio reported with a crackle. The hedgeman smiled without teeth and waited for the ride. I closed the door and leaned my head against the wood. My hands tingled with the aftershock of staying put. She stood behind me with her palms open like an apology. We still need to talk, I said, and the bell rang again. I killed the chime again and pointed her to the hallway. Same plan, I lifted the chain and held still. Identify yourself, I called through the crack without breathing. A pause answered like pressure on a bruise. Utility check, a new voice too smooth for this hour. No service scheduled, I slid the chain back in place. Metal brushed metal at the side entrance and stopped. They were testing every seam while talking at the front. The kids shifted under the blanket and watched my mouth. Count in 4s, I told them, tapping the table in sync. Their whispers stacked into a steady rhythm I could track. If counting broke, danger would be inside the room. The hallway camera flashed a warning and then died. Wi-Fi dropped to 0 and took the feeds with it. I checked the breaker list and felt heat rise. Power stayed up, only the router had been cut. A thump from outside the office window snapped my head. I grabbed a wooden dowel and jammed it under the sash. Another push hit the glass and backed off fast. They wanted us to panic and rush toward noise. Patrol radio crackled from the street in short bursts. Blue light passed our curtains, then faded at the corner. They were moving around the block instead of parking. The timing left a hole big enough for a try. Her phone lit with a single ellipsis from unknown. I snapped the battery case off and dropped it into foil. She bit her lip and nodded without asking why. We were done being passive targets for pings. The bell pinged twice in a tight pattern, then silence. I checked the peephole and saw no one on the stoop. Moisture crept along the edge like a thin line. I smelled wet paint and froze mid-breath. I cracked the door an inch and looked down. OSM. Ear of bright marker ran across the threshold. Fresh, wide, right where a boot would land. They were trying to tag a shoe for later follow. Do not step out, I told her, keeping my voice low. She lifted both kids and scooted them deeper into the den. I wiped the mark with an old rag and bagged it. Evidence first, then movement, then talk. A faint click echoed from the mailbox again. I crouched at the interior slot and listened close. Tiny ticks, spaced like a metronome, drifted from inside. Not a tracker, a listening capsule glued behind the hinge. I slid a thin blade under the lip and levered gently. The capsule peeled free with a tacky sound and buzzed. I dropped it into a soup can and clamped the lid. The buzzing dulled, but it didn't stop. The side gate popped and swung, then rested half closed. I raised my hand and counted down with fingers. On 0, I laid on the car alarm 3 times. Running feet slapped pavement and split in different directions. I spoke into the den without turning around. Bathroom light on, curtain closed, no silhouette. She moved quick and followed orders like muscle memory. We practiced safety tonight while fear tried to sell shortcuts. A shadow slid across the upstairs landing and paused. I reached the bottom stair and waited with the dowel. "Police sweep upstairs," a voice called from the front. I didn't buy it, the cadence missed our officer's tone. I put my mouth near the door seam and tested him. "What's our case number from earlier?" Silence stretched, then a stumble of numbers that missed 2 digits. "Leave now," I said, and the landing shadow withdrew. Tires squealed 1 street over and a horn barked twice. The radio on the curb erupted with overlapping traffic. "Unit in pursuit," van failing to yield, plate partial match. I leaned my forehead against the door and exhaled once. Her eyes asked the question I hadn't answered. "Can I trust you when it costs you?" I thought. Out loud, I gave her a job with weight. "Call the neighbor, ask for live eyes on our roofline." She dialed and held to the window, breath controlled. "Nothing on top," she mouthed, then stiffened mid-scan. 2 forms near the hedge across the street. I opened the porch camera app on cellular and saw them too. They started toward our walkway, then halted as backup arrived. Patrol swept in from both ends and boxed the lane. Orders rang out and hands went up fast. A third figure broke and bolted toward our side yard. I charged to the kitchen exit and braced the chair deeper. The runner hit the handle and grunted from the block. Patrol rounded the corner and made contact clean. Cuffs clicked and we finally breathed like humans again. "Clear inside," an officer announced through the main door. This time he gave our case number before I asked. I unlocked the chain and opened wide for a quick pass. 3 uniforms entered and checked every locked point. I held up the soup can and the bagged rag. "Found these during the last 10 minutes. Gloves took them and the notepad came out fast. The older officer's jaw tightened by a degree. "Van stopped 2 blocks down," he reported while writing. "Driver matches the porch video from earlier clips." "Charges?" I asked it flat and waited for a list. "Stalking, attempted entry, unlawful surveillance," he answered. She lowered to the couch and the kids crawled into her arms. They watched my face, not the badges or the gear. I stood still long enough to feel the weight of the room. Relief tried to climb in, but trust blocked the door. The officer handed me a card with a direct line. "Call if anything else pings tonight." He glanced at the upstairs hall and then back to me. "Also move your router and set a timer plug." I walked him out and secured both locks once more. The block quieted to the steady drone of late traffic. Inside, the kids blinked heavy and finally sagged. She looked at me like a verdict was due. "We still have us," she managed, voice small but honest. "I need more than words," I answered because I did. "Then give me work," she said, fingers tight around the blanket edge. "Start with the door tomorrow," I said, and my jaw unclenched. We cleaned the hall of scuffs and stacked the evidence neatly. I reset alarms on manual switches instead of the app. She placed a chair by the kids and sat without fidgeting. I took the floor by the entry and waited for whatever came next. A fist hammered the door twice and didn't wait. "Police follow up," a voice called, crisp and familiar. I checked the peephole and saw the older officer's cap. I opened with the deadbolt still set, no more tricks. He held a tablet and angled it toward me. Found this on the passenger's device, he said, breath steady. A photo album labeled with our street number filled the screen. The top image showed my kids through our front window tonight. My chest went cold, then hot enough to sting. Any link to us beyond this, I asked, words measured. Working theory is scouting for easy entries, he answered. Your door marks suggest multiple attempts, that part I already knew. He lifted a clear bag with a wallet and tea. Whoa, cards. Both cards carried different names for the same face. We're checking which one matches the prints, he added. So far nothing tied to you by name. She hovered behind me and listened without blinking. Is the other suspect still out there? She asked. Likely, the officer replied, then glanced toward our sidewalk. Units remain nearby. He will have a hard time returning. Walk me through the blind spots, he requested, stepping inside. I led him to the dining arch and the office window. He pressed a knuckle to the frame and nodded once. Softwood here, easy pry, he said, then marked his pad. He paused at the mailbox slot and flicked the hinge. Good pull on that transmitter, he acknowledged, eyes on the can. We'll sweep the exterior again before shift change. He lowered his voice, don't open for anyone not confirmed. He left us with a promise of a dawn patrol. The kids turned in their sleep and released a low sigh. She tucked the blanket under their knees with careful fingers. I stood with my hands on the table, ready to move. Locksmith at first light, she said, squaring her shoulders. Long screws, reinforced strike, Newgate hardware. She looked at me and waited for a reaction. I nodded once. Actions beat apologies when fear lingers. My phone vibrated with a silent alert from the cameras. Driveway view snapped to a still frame from 5 minutes earlier. A compact car had paused at the mouth of our curb. The driver leaned forward, then rolled on without stopping. The neighbor pinged our chat with another clip. Someone checked your trash bins 20 minutes ago. I opened it and watched gloved hands lift each lid. A flashlight swept inside, then clicked off when a car passed. I pulled gloves from the drawer and grabbed a trash bag. We emptied our kitchen bin into a black sack fast. Receipts, wipes, a torn envelope with our last name. I shredded the address header and dumped it into water. A low clatter sounded from the side walkway again. I motioned her to stay and moved barefoot toward the noise. A small rectangle lay near the gate, blinking faintly. A dropped key fob for a different vehicle, not ours. I picked it up with 2 fingers and carried it inside. She recognized the emblem and stiffened in place. That's the other guy's, she whispered, voice tight. He must have circled back and lost it. I placed it in a sandwich bag and wrote the time. The patrol car cruised past and I flagged them with a wave. The younger officer collected the bag and thanked us. More leverage for charges, he said, then scanned the hedge. When the car rolled off, the house felt louder. Pipes ticked, the fridge clicked, floorboards shifted and settled. She reached for my arm and stopped at the elbow. Next step, she asked, eyes steady for once. Plan room by room, I answered, no hesitation. Move the router to the center, kill the mailbox slot. Install window bars for the office and the mudroom. Teach the kids a 2-word code for emergencies. She repeated the code with a whisper and a nod. Tiny feet pattered as our son sat up again. Water, he murmured, rubbing his eyes with a fist. I handed him a cup and watched him drink without spilling. He leaned against my chest and drifted fast. Warm weight anchored me better than any advice. I carried him back and tucked him beside his sister. She stroked his hair once, then looked at the door again. A ping hit my phone from the case officer's line. Van impounded, second phone recovered near your block. A photo followed, screen locked, message preview still visible. One more stop then home, it read, sent an hour before. One more stop, I repeated and felt my throat tighten. She looked at the tablet photo still burned into my brain. Us, she whispered, and I could not argue that. We both stared at the hallway as if it might answer. Headlights swept across our ceiling and disappeared. No engine sound followed, which meant a parked car. I checked the peephole and saw no one at the stoop. I touched the glass, a vibration trembled under my fingertip. I called the direct number and kept my voice flat. Possible lookout across from us, engine off, windows up. Stay inside, we're 2 minutes out, the officer replied. 2 minutes stretched and I counted each inhale to 20. A spotlight flashed down the block, then clicked off. Red and blue washed over the asphalt in slow pulses. A loud hail boomed, a door creaked, footsteps shuffled. Then a 4-note chirp, car unlocked, and an engine growled awake. Tires squealed and the chase snapped alive again. Units launched after it and their sirens swallowed our street. My hands shook once and then steadied. She met my eyes and didn't look away this time. Tomorrow we change the locks, she said, voice firm. And the code words stick, I added, holding her gaze. We tell your mother after the kids nap, she continued. Agreed, I said, and felt the fire. Our rusty inch of ground return. The house settled as if it finally trusted us back. I sat with my back to the entry and listened for anything. She pulled another blanket over the kids and stayed upright. We watched the same doorway and waited for dawn to test us. Knocking woke the kids before sunrise, short, steady, official. Locksmith, a voice called, and a truck idled at the curb. I checked the feed, matched the badge to the dispatcher text. I opened fast and kept my eyes on the street. He worked quick with long bolts and a strike plate. I held a flashlight while he drilled through stubborn wood. This frame was chewed already, he muttered, making 2 passes. I signed his tablet, then scanned the sidewalk for watchers. Her phone buzzed on the table with a new notice. Welfare check scheduled, the header read, and my stomach flipped. Anonymous report about children in danger. She stared at me. Someone pushed a button that could take our voice away. We cooperate, I said, because hiding feeds trouble. Call our case officer first, I added, dialing the direct number. He answered on the second ring and promised to join. We cleaned the hallway while listening for another knock. The doorbell rang 3 measured chimes, then silence again. A woman in a windbreaker held a clipboard and a tote. Child Services, she announced, calm and controlled for chaos. The officer's cruiser rolled up behind her like punctuation. We let them in and kept movements visible and slow. The kids watched cartoons with the volume low by design. Any injuries, she asked, scanning exposed skin with trained eyes. None, I said, and lifted sleeves to remove doubt. Any firearms, the officer asked, glancing toward the den. No, I answered, and he noted it without blinking. Last night's suspects in custody, he added, easing shoulders slightly. One more unknown at large, the room cooled a degree. The social worker opened the tote and produced forms. Describe the event using plain language, she requested. I gave a clean timeline without commentary or blame. She watched our faces like a doctor reading vitals. Her gaze drifted to my wife's hands, tight and pale. Do you feel safe staying here tonight? She asked gently. Yes, came the answer, firm but edged with fear. Trust was a decision we were making in public. A tap at the window startled everyone, including the officer. The neighbor's face appeared with both palms raised high. He pointed to a sedan creeping past the mailbox again. I handed the officer a note with the plate digits. He radioed the description while the worker packed up. I'll close this as unfounded, she said, voice clear. File a safety plan anyway, she added, offering a sheet. We signed and posted it on the fridge because paper speaks. The kids asked for breakfast and we moved with purpose. She poured cereal while I checked outdoor angles. A guy across the way pretended to jog badly. He tracked our door every lap, counting seconds between glances. I stepped onto the porch with a bag of trash. He cut the corner and drifted nearer like static. "Lose something last night?" I asked, keeping the bag swinging. He kept moving, then tapped his pocket and smirked. I pitched the bag into the bin and clapped twice. The neighbor's dog exploded into noise by prearrangement. The jogger flinched and sprinted away without grace. Fear hates witnesses who already hold cameras. The officer texted a photo of recovered gear. A handheld unit showed captured key fob signals logged by time. "Your car pinged twice yesterday," his message read. Someone had cloned access before the first knock ever landed. I took the fob from the drawer and wrapped it in foil. We covered the spare with a case that blocks range. She pressed her lips and nodded like an oath. No more easy openings for anyone, including us. A delivery van rolled up at mid-morning and cut the engine. Same company as last night's excuse, different driver and smile. "Package for you," he called, waving a scanner toward the porch. I held up a hand and demanded the order number. He recited a string that matched nothing in our email. "Return it to sender," I said, closing the screen door. He tried again with a friendly shrug and patient eyes. The patrol car turned the corner and the van rolled off. Our teen from last night appeared at noon with his mother. They stopped at the sidewalk and lifted their hands high. "Apology," the mom called, voice shaking yet stubborn. I stepped out and kept the door open behind me. The boy held out a folded note with careful corners. "I walked the fence line with the officer already," he said. "I'll help patch it this weekend," he added, eyes wet. His mother nodded, then stared at the mailbox with disgust. "You two didn't do this," I told them, giving space. "We know," she answered, pulling her kid into a side hug. "Still, we wanted you to see our faces," she added. Seeing their fear next to ours recalibrated blame. I returned inside and found my wife at the table. She slid a small key across the wood toward me. "The car goes to the shop for a full sweep," she said. "I'll ride with my sister until then." That sounded like growth. "After that, therapy," I said, and watched her breathing. She nodded once and gripped the edge like an anchor. "I won't run for the door again," she said, quieter. "Promises are lighter than bolts, but they still hold weight." My phone pinged with a new clip from the city feed. The van from last night sat on a tow truck bed. In the cab, an officer displayed our porch photo to the driver. A slow head shake followed, then a finger pointed left. I pulled up a map and traced his direction. 3 alleys behind our block formed a clean loop. If you wanted quick exits, you parked there. I circled the area and marked possible hideouts in red. The case officer called again with an update. "Second phone cracked," he reported, voice clipped and direct. A draft text sat on the device addressed to a contact. "Hit the mailbox at noon," it read, no names attached. Noon had passed and our mailbox sat empty and clean. "Expect a frustrated attempt later," he warned, then clicked off. We moved the kids to the back room for a nap. She and I took the doorway like sentries who had learned. An engine coughed outside and died mid-turn. A man walked up with a clipboard and a reflective vest. "Smart meter install," he called, tapping the badge on his chest. I took a photo and texted the utility with 2 words, "Verify please." "Not ours," the reply came fast and my hand tightened. I cracked the door with the chain set and stared at him. "Wrong address," I said, letting the camera catch his face. He held my gaze too long, then backed toward the street. The officer's car slid in at the same moment. They stopped him at the hydrant and took the badge. Fake cheap, shiny enough to fool a tired neighbor. He smiled with flat eyes and wouldn't answer questions. Kids woke to the sound of radios and boots. My daughter reached for my neck and anchored there. My son peered over my shoulder toward the window. "Safe words," I reminded softly, and they repeated both. The suspect's pocket coughed up a key analyzer. The officer held it up like a fish pulled from water. "Where are your friends?" he asked, tone professional and spare. The man shrugged and stared at our porch like a challenge. Backup arrived and they moved him to a cruiser. The street exhaled, but tension clung to the hedges. I looked at my wife and saw a different posture. She stood straight, hands loose, ready to help rather than hide. "Time for the kids to see us strong," I said. She nodded and lifted our daughter onto her hip. "Show them the routine," she replied, eyes set. We walked the house with them, step by step, no panic. We drilled our code words again at each door. They answered through yawns and tried to beat each other. I made it a game, then made it serious. They understood the difference because our faces told them. The officer returned with a short list of next steps. Court dates, statement times, a detective meeting tomorrow. "Keep recording everything," he advised, pointing to the cameras. "Tonight should stay quiet," he added, but he didn't promise. Neighbors drifted over with cautious waves and quick questions. I accepted 3 offers without pride getting in the way. Motion lights for the alley, extra eyes on school pickup. A spare driveway for our car once the sweep finished. After they left, the house settled into a new pattern. Doors latched with solid resistance instead of soft clicks. Every window resisted a pry with a satisfying bite. The mailbox slot wore a metal plate like a shield. She brewed tea and set a mug near my hand. No speech, no mention of last night's sprint. Just a hot cup and a held look that asked permission. "Stay," I said, and she sat across from me without flinching. Near dusk, an unfamiliar sedan eased down our lane again. Slow, cautious, windows up, no plates visible from front. I lifted my phone and filmed the pass without comment. The driver kept eyes forward, then turned at the stop sign. The case officer texted a single instruction: hold position. Units drifted into the block like chess pieces taking squares. The sedan returned and saw them, then accelerated hard. 2 cruisers followed with sirens off and lights muted. I closed the door and checked the night locks twice. She checked the back while I checked the front. The kids colored at the table and whispered our code. We held our stations and waited for the call that ends it. It never came that hour, and I learned something vital. Waiting can be an action if you choose it together. She met my eyes and didn't look away even once. The door held, the cameras blinked, and we stood our ground. The detective arrived before dusk, no cruiser, just a plain sedan. He carried a small, hard case and a printed photo grid. "We can bait whoever's left," he said, eyes on my doorway. I let him in and locked the latch behind us tight. He unpacked 2 motion tiles and a decoy envelope. "Place this where they can't resist," he instructed without drama. "Then step back and let the tech talk." I pointed to the hedge line where hands kept wandering. We planted the decoy under a loose board by the walk. 1 tile went beneath it, the other near the fence gap. He tested the ping with a chirp that made me flinch. When both chime together, you've got touch and intent. She listened from the kitchen and rolled her sleeves. "Tell me my role," she asked, voice steady this time. "Keep the kids centered and ready for the code," he answered. She nodded once and moved into position like she owned it. I stood with the detective at the front window. We watched the street settle into that nervous afternoon quiet. He chewed a mint and tracked every passerby with calm focus. "I want you 2 out of the blast zone." "Define blast zone," I said, and he met my look. "The entry in the flanks during first contact," he clarified. "You've been brave enough," he added, not unkindly. "Now be smart enough to survive this part." The tiles sent a single chirp, false alarm, then silence. I felt my shoulders rise, then forced them to drop. He clicked a pen and logged the time without comment. We waited like hunters who finally respect the wind. The neighbor texted a quick burst of caps, sedan again, slow. My heartbeat ticked up and then leveled under stubborn breath. The detective peered around the curtain 1 inch. Dark glass, no front plate, same silhouette as last pass. He put a fingertip to my wrist, hold. The sedan crept past the curb and rolled through the stop. Not yet, he murmured, then scanned the opposite sidewalk. A man in a hoodie lagged behind, pretending to scroll. 2 hikers walked a dog and forced the hoodie to pause. He studied a house number and drifted closer to our hedge. The sedan looped the block and aimed back toward center. "Watch the tiles," the detective whispered, eyes never leaving him. One chirp from the fence sensor. Another chirp from the board by the walk. The man crouched and slid fingers under the loose plank. The sedan idled 3 houses down like a getaway promise. Now the detective snapped and his tone flipped everything. He waved for backup already waiting at the corner. 2 unmarked units slid in without blare or shine. The hoodie straightened and tried to stroll like he belonged. He stepped on the board and froze at the second chime. The detective pushed the door and took 3 clean strides. "Hands visible," he called, and his badge flashed hard. The man bolted toward the side yard with a clipped grunt. I moved to block the inner hallway while he ran. The tiles sang again as he kicked through the shrubs. She gathered the kids and started the drill without prompting. I heard their tiny voices form the code and hold. The runner hit the gate and found a new bar installed. He bounced off it and spun toward the driveway. An unmarked car glided in and closed that path. He feinted left, then leaped toward the porch step. I met him at the threshold with nothing but stance. He hesitated at my posture and glanced for a weak spot. No gap, no flicker, nothing soft tonight. The detective's partner wrapped him at the waist and drove down. Metal snapped as cuffs bit into thrashing wrists. He cursed into the concrete and kicked once at air. The sedan gunned it and fled toward the arterial. 2 units followed with a quick chirp and no drama. I closed the door and leaned against it for one breath. She emerged with the kids pressed to her sides. Their cheeks held tear tracks, but their eyes stayed open. Resilience looks small until you need it. The detective re-entered with a shake of his head. "Driver got away for now," he reported, unflustered. "We have the lurker and the tools, though." He lifted a pouch filled with pics and a signal reader. He set a recorder on the table and clicked it on. "Short statement while memories are sharp," he requested. I walked through the beats minute by minute. No embroidery, no editorial, just the living sequence. The kids colored beside us and listened to our cadence. My wife kept one hand on their shoulders the whole time. Her other hand found mine under the table. Grip firm, not pleading, not apologizing, choosing. The recorder clicked off and the detective stood. "Prosecutor will like clean evidence and clean timelines," he said. He glanced at the reinforced frame and the barred gate. "You tighten the problem until it squeaked." He turned to my wife and measured her eyes. "You stayed with the plan when it mattered," he noted. She exhaled like she hadn't allowed herself that yet. He gave her a card with a single number handwritten. "Call me if anyone sniffs around again," he added. "Call anyway." I returned and he actually smiled. He packed the pouch and palmed the motion tiles. "Keep the decoy board for a week." After he left, the house felt unfamiliar in a good way. Not silent, alert, tuned to our choices instead of theirs. She poured water and slid a glass toward me. I drank and waited for the conversation we couldn't dodge. "I ran," she started, and her voice didn't shake. "I know," I answered, keeping my tone even and real. "I froze," she continued, and then caught herself. "No, tonight I stayed, that's the truth I want." I let that sit until it anchored. "I needed to see you take a hit with us," I said. "Not a punch, a risk." "You did," she replied, holding eye contact like it mattered. Our son brought over a drawing with blocky figures. 4 stick bodies held hands inside a square. A scribble stood outside with a line through it. He tapped the square twice and grinned. I hugged him and kissed his head on instinct. He bolted back to the crayons and started another square. My daughter crawled into my lap and watched the door. She relaxed only when the bolt clicked firm. The phone vibrated with one more update. Driver abandoned the sedan and ran into the park, the text read. K9 tracking at dusk. I typed back a thank you that felt too small. We ate standing up and kept our ears on the yard. Forks clinked, TV murmured, tires whispered far away. Normal noises tried to return like shy animals. I let them because vigilance can live beside peace. As night edged in, neighbors messaged offers to sit watch. I accepted one and rotated our schedule to include them. She drafted a list for tomorrow with firm bullet points. Therapist, car clinic, hardware store, no waiver. We moved the kids to their beds and sat between rooms. She rested her head against the wall and closed her eyes. I am not who I was yesterday, she said. Neither am I answered and believed it for once. My phone buzzed again, last ping of the day. Subject in custody, the detective texted, 2 words only. I read them aloud and felt my spine unlock. She laughed through tears that finally made sense. We walked the perimeter one final time by habit. Every latch held and every window bit the frame. The decoy board sat where we left it, ignored. I took that as the quietest victory of the night. Back at the table, she reached for my hand again. Next time fear knocks, she said, eyes clear. I will not leave them. Then we can build again, I answered and listened for any echo.